I told Caleb that I wanted to get started ASAP this morning because I don't know how lengthy this will be. I'm not going to keep you here forever, but I ended up having more information than I thought that I would. So I wanted to begin post-haste. Also, he jokingly asked if I had a Mother's Day sermon this morning, and I said no, but I do want to wish the mothers a happy Mother's Day this morning. And also, door knocking this morning may depend on the weather. We'll keep an eye on it and see what happens there. So please keep that in mind. Our title this morning is Limited Vision, and as you heard Ian read, and thank you for the prayer, Ian, wherever you are. Our text this morning is 2Chron 26. We'll be discussing Uzziah, however you want to pronounce his name. Doesn't matter. I want to begin with this thought. Flying in fog is quite challenging. In other words, flying with limited vision. And I'm certainly not going to stand here and pretend to know much at all about aviation, but I did have a coworker. What was the commercial? Are you a doctor? No, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn. Well, I do have a coworker who has or had his pilot's license, and I think I recall him saying that if you have like really dense fog, or maybe if you get caught up in a cloud, and maybe you're not experienced or you don't know how to read instrumentation, you can get so disoriented that you literally don't know up from down. You lose sight of the horizon, maybe your balance in your inner ear gets off because you don't have a visual reference, and you really can't tell what your bearings are. And you could crash a plane because you can't tell up from down. Flying with limited visibility, fog, is quite challenging even for the most experienced of pilots. For pilots that are not as skilled, fog is an extremely dangerous and potentially deadly hazard. Each year, around 440 people are killed due to weather-related aviation accidents, including the conditions of low visibility and ceilings. Now, if I can make a jump here and speak metaphorically. When people talk about the fog of life, I know you've seen these vanity plates or bumper stickers before. God is my copilot. And it's funny to me because if you read that and think about it, there is a subliminal message that's being transmitted there that people don't realize what they're actually saying when they say that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. God is my copilot. Now, let me tie those thoughts up together with this. Limited visibility and God is my, quote, copilot. 2 Chronicles 26:3, as Ian read for, 16 years old was Uzziah when he began to reign. Now, Joash was 7 when he was anointed. What is it like for a 16-year-old to be anointed king? Now, it could be the case that 16-year-olds back then were different from 16-year-olds today. But Joash had Jehoiada's counsel at his disposal. I can't imagine at 16 that Uzziah doesn't have some form of consultation from older individuals, possibly at least for a while. He reigned 52 years. His mother's name also was Jecoliah of Jerusalem. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah did. He had that as a pattern. And he sought God in the days of Zechariah. There's his consultation. Well, what is the distinguishing factor that's giving him an edge? Who had understanding in the visions of God. Now, that's what ties together the thought of limited vision. Here is Uzziah, and at this particular point, as he starts out and as he moves along, he is consulting with an individual who has more than just limited visibility. Now, last week, as I tend to do, I try to tie into the previous week's thought, if you can recall those. And the title was, There's a Little Jonah in All of Us. One of the points that I was making was, or one of the thoughts that we were pondering about Jonah, is it the case that one of his problems that he just didn't trust because he just was like any other human being? He only gets to see limited pieces of the puzzle. And maybe he's struggling because he just can't see the big picture. We're giving him a break. But here's the paradox. If you could see all the pieces of the puzzle, then what? You wouldn't need to trust. Romans 8:24, for we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man sees, why does he hope for it? I wouldn't say that's in the realm of physical impossibilities, like you're violating a physical law maybe necessarily, but metaphysically, if you can see something, why do you hope for it? It's visibly manifest. So the two are exclusive. If you could see everything, then you wouldn't need to trust. But here, Paul says, if a man sees something, he doesn't need to hope for it. But if we hope for what we see not, then do we have to practice patience to wait for it. Now, here is where, on a human level, we all identify and basically say, sometimes as a human being, it's nice to not have to walk in the dark all the time, not to have to feel for the light switch and to see where you're headed in the night when you have to have a restroom break and you stump your toe. Boy, it's nice to not have to stump my toe on things that I can't see because it hurts. And you say to yourself, as you have that inner dialogue with yourself about your Christianity, and you say, why does everything have to be built on trust? All of this stuff that is of monumental magnitude, why does it have to be built on trust? But then you go back to the paradox again. If you don't want to be in a position to trust, then you have to be able to see everything. And really what you're saying there is, if you don't want to be in a position to have to trust, that means you would have to be God in that sense. You would have to be the being that sees every part of the puzzle. Then you don't have to be in the weakened state of having to trust in things that you don't see. And we say, why does everything have to be built on trust? But then we do all of this stuff on a regular basis in life that basically implies there has to be an element of trust. What does your spouse do when you can't see? Well, you just have to trust that they're doing what they're supposed to do. What does your child do when you can't see and they've got access to the internet if it's unfiltered? Well, you have to trust in certain circumstances when you are trying to teach them independence that they're going to make good decisions while you're not there. What do you do when you can't see your employee? What do you do when you can't see everything that your employer does, or your doctor, or your lawyer, or your food preparer? Hey, what are you doing with my food back there? Well, you got to trust that they're sanitary, right? Now, there is the health inspector, and they do what they do, but that doesn't mean that you can't have instances where I don't really trust what my food preparer does because who knows what they do in certain instances. Now, I'll just stop there before I make you disgusted. But do you get my point? There's an element of trust in everything that we do in regular life. So when we say, why does everything have to be built on trust? But we operate like that already in our existence. Now, here's what I'm driving at. Finish this idea. If I could see the future, then what? Would you change it, maybe? When we're talking about limited vision, you just toy with these ideas. If I could see the future, what would I do? Now, wasn't that one of the plots in Back to the Future? He accidentally ends up going back in time, but while he's there, he tries to behave in a certain way and make certain decisions that will change how the future is. If you could see the future, would you behave differently to try to change it? Now, there's a subplot to this in the second movie, Back to the Future 2, where he finds a sports almanac and he gets to see what every team has done and who won and who lost for 50 years. If you could see the future, would you bet on it? Because it was so whatever? Well, here's part of what you're really saying. Here's the idea behind the idea. If you could see the future, what you're really saying is it would erase the unknown. And everybody likes to talk about their phobias now, right? Xenophobia. Johnny did a lesson on this that I will never forget years ago. Fear of the unknown. If I could see the future, it would erase, in my mind, I think, the unknown. Well, what would that do? Well, that would mean that you would know what's going to happen. Well, what does that do as you peel the layers back? What that really means is, do you get to ease your fears if you know the future? We think we get to relieve our anxiety. If I just knew what's going to happen, at least I would feel like I could prepare for it. So we're trying to analyze what is going on with the human psyche. Why do we behave the way that we do? And let me tell you, I like having control. I like a stable atmosphere. I do not like change. I like to know what's going to happen. Why? I don't know why I'm wired that way. I wish I wasn't a lot. If you could see the future, would you try to change it? Or would it change you? Acts 21:8. And the next day we that were of Paul's company departed and came unto Caesarea. And we entered into the house of Philip the evangelist, which was one of the 7, and abode with him. And the same man had 4 daughters, virgins, which did prophesy. And as we tarried there many days, there came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. You got prophets everywhere coming at your ears. Can you imagine some of the stuff that they would have heard and been exposed to? What would it be like to have someone in your presence who could prophesy and either tell you what you're thinking or tell you what's about to happen, maybe in the immediate future or in the distant future? What would that be like? That's just mind-blowing. Imagine the conversations that they had. Well, here's one of them. And when Agabus was come to us, he took Paul's girdle or his belt and bound his hands and feet and said, Thus saith the Holy Ghost. Now, you just stop for a second. What would you think about a guy who shows up and you trust that he has prophetic ability, he's proven himself, and he says, hey, give me your belt. What? My pants are being held up with this belt. Why do you want my belt? The level of attention that something like that would get, what is this guy up to? And he's a prophet. What do you need my belt for? Thus saith the Holy Ghost, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owns this belt, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. And when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go up to Jerusalem. If you could hear the future, would you try to change it? Don't go, Paul. Don't do it. Then Paul answered, What mean ye to weep and to break my heart? Because I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem. What if you knew that you were going to die soon and be arrested in the process? Would you try to change the future? And we say, boy, I wish I knew the future. But sometimes you may say, boy, I wish I didn't know that. Ignorance sometimes is bliss. Paul saw the future, and it seemed to have prepared him somehow. And I don't know what all else was divulged to him when he had his vision and his encounter with the Lord at his conversion, and all of the things that the Lord told him and showed him would come to pass. I don't know what all that entailed. But whatever happened, he is apparently preparing himself the whole time. And when he sees the future, he's ready for it. And he told everyone, don't weep. But then, when you look at Elisha and what he saw in the future, it made him weep. So what does that mean? Does seeing the future necessarily help or make things better? 2 Kings 8:10, And Elisha said unto him, Go, say unto him, Thou mayest certainly recover, howbeit the Lord has showed me that he, the king of Syria, shall surely die. And he settled his countenance steadfastly until he was ashamed, and the man of God wept. And Hazael said, Why weepeth my Lord? And he answered, Because I know the evil that you will do to the children of Israel. Now, those are two negative instances, we think, of what can happen in the future. What would you think if you could see the future and it was bright? How do you think that would change your psyche and your behavior? Now, I'm not saying necessarily that I know what King Uzziah was exposed to, but we're just playing with this idea of vision. And I just can't imagine that if Uzziah is consulting with Zechariah, who has understanding in the visions of God, it's not helping him to make good decisions. So he's ending up, apparently, in a very prosperous position because he's using the vision that is not limited that he has access to. And he went forth and warred against the Philistines and brake down the wall of Gath and the wall of Jabneh and the wall of Ashdod, and built cities about Ashdod and among the Philistines. And God helped him against the Philistines and against the Arabians that dwelt in Gerbaal and the Mehunims. And the Ammonites gave gifts to Uzziah. Boy, that is wild. And his name spread abroad even to the entering in of Egypt. That's a humongous deal. For he strengthened himself exceedingly. What would you do if you knew that was going to be your future? And you think about, you imagine yourself now, and you don't know what's going to happen, and things seem precarious, and it seems negative. What would you do if somebody could tell you it's going to be good, and you would say, boy, I am energized. Bring it on. And you would just wake up in the morning with this vigor and just this disposition that you're going to conquer everything because you know it's going to be good. But just because you know it's going to be good at a certain point, Uzziah couldn't see everything, and boy, he didn't see this coming. He was on a roll, and then his heart outgrew his, quote, head, and we're talking about God. 2 Chronicles 26:16. What does the future, having access to these visions, do for a person? Does it make them inoculated against the provision of calamity? But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. For he transgressed against the Lord his God and went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense. As I read this with this particular mindset, do you know what I classify this as? All of this together is this: I like being in control. Can you imagine a man like Uzziah who has almost literally the world at his feet? The Ammonites are giving him gifts. He's building cities in Philistine territory, and Egypt has regard for him. He's got everything he needs. Why would I feel like I need to go into the temple and tell the priest, step aside, son, I'm about to sacrifice and burn incense? Why would I need to do that? But his heart was lifted up, and he's saying to himself, I like being in control, and nothing will stop me. God is my copilot. Do you get it? Now I'm asking the question, when someone says, with good intention, God is my co-pilot, is that a religious Freudian slip? What is that? That's when you accidentally say something that's in your subconscious that you're trying to suppress, and then it comes out. When a person says, God is my co-pilot, are they betraying how they really feel? Well, I like having God over here on the side, but I still want to be in control of the aircraft. What you're really saying is you don't want God in control. That's me. I like saying that, and I don't like admitting it. And I behave that way because I like being in control. When we say, I wish I could see the future, what you're really saying is, I like being in control. And that is one of the core weaknesses of the flesh. It always wants control. That is the constant running battle. However you want to classify the sins that it likes, it's about being in control. I want what is good for the flesh, or it wants. What do you mean, it? I'll get to that in a second. Romans 7:23. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Uzziah is in control, and he's at the pinnacle of human achievement then. All of these other nations and entities are subject to his authority, which is apparently, seemingly, a rare circumstance in their history. And then his flesh fails him, in multiple ways. A man who has access to another man named Zechariah, who had understanding in the visions of God, and he's got it going on. And then he just gets to this point where he can't control it. 2 Chronicles 26:19. Then Uzziah was wroth when he took the censer, and they told him, "This is not your business." And he was wroth, as angry as you can get. Letting go of things is a skill, and it's a hard one. And they're telling him, you need to let go. This is not your business. You're not in control here. And he just can't take it. And learning to let things go is hard. And it makes you frustrated. Why? Because you want to be in control. And it's difficult to get to a point where you say, I'm just going to let it go because I'm not in control. And he had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priest, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead. Like literally, physically, his flesh is failing him on the spot. And of all the places to get leprosy, I would not want it on my face because you won't look the same. Leprosy even rose up in his forehead because the priests in the house of the Lord from beside the incense beside the incense altar. And Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead, and they thrust him out from there. Yea, himself hasted also to go out. Boy, he's in a panic now, because the Lord had smitten him. And Uzziah the king was a leper to the day of his death. And don't you think he knew about Naaman? Naaman was cured, and here is Uzziah, and he has to suffer the rest of his days as a leper, and he dwelt in a hospital the rest of his life as the king, stuck in a hospital because he's a leper. Are you in control, king? No, I am not. Here's a more pointed word. Romans 7:23 says, I see a law in my members warring against the law of my mind, bringing me into captivity. Can we just say it this way? Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the slavery of corruption. Can you pick a more tainted word than that? And that's the description of all of creation. The creature itself shall also be delivered from the slavery of corruption, a slave to the flesh. Matt, you know I like quoting song lyrics. I don't know if you listen to Iron Maiden. I've quoted them more than once. They have a song called Power Slave. And he says in the song, I'm a slave to the power of death. Now it's about an Egyptian god, but still, that's interesting that a heavy metal band has those thoughts. Slave to the power of death. I'm a slave of corruption. The irony is that a liberating thought? I am a slave to the flesh, but that's a liberating thought. Why? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then with the mind, I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin. Do you know what? That sounds like Paul is saying there's actually two different people. We talked about that before. But I have to tell you, you read so fast and you don't meditate. I have never digested this before. I myself serve the law of God? Well, what do you mean? Your mind is yourself, and your flesh is this corruptive element. And as long as the mind is intact and your flesh is failing, it seems like you're good. But when the mind is gone, you're gone. That's when you've lost. So then with the mind, he says, myself is my mind, and my mind is myself. Boy, that is a liberating thought. With the mind, myself is serving the law of God, even though the flesh constantly gives in and causes me trouble because it's corrupt and I'm a slave to it. And just, do you think that God looks down and says, all of these poor people in slavery to the flesh, and they didn't have a choice? I pity them. If you're serving God with your mind, even though you're struggling, you're still doing all right. But if the mind is gone, you're gone. Now somebody gets it here. If God is your copilot, switch seats. Do you get it? Now somebody says this, well, that's nice. Bumper sticker wisdom makes me think, but there's some pretty clever bumper stickers out there. There'll be another one coming up here in just a moment. They will make you think. But what does that mean? A person says, well, thanks a million, but we aren't flying a plane here. What am I supposed to do with this? What does it look like? We always ask this question. What do these principles look like in practice? Because if you don't tell me how to use it, it's useless. It's just theory and it's textbook knowledge. What do I do with this in practice? And Caleb brought this up Wednesday, and I have to tell you, I have never paid any attention to this. This is a Titus 3:8. This is a faithful saying, and these things I will that thou affirm constantly, that they which believe in God might be careful. And I wanted so bad for this Greek word to be the same one that Jesus says, don't be anxious about things. It does mean be anxious and careful, but it's not the same word. But I wanted it to be, but it's not. They which have believed in God, be anxious. What do you do when you're anxious? It's all you think about all the time, right? He's not saying that in a negative sense. He's saying think about this constantly. Affirm constantly. Be anxious. Let it bother you constantly. What? Maintain good works. These things are good and profitable unto men, and let ours also learn to maintain good works for necessary uses, that they be not unfruitful. And negative Nancy says this, faithfulness and righteousness always seems to be a tenuous state. It sounds like Christianity is you're walking on a knife's edge waiting to fall to the left or to the right at any moment. You say it just always sounds like it's a warning to us that we're about to fail. Well, the idea is that it requires constant nurturing and maintenance. Your Christianity requires nurturing and it requires maintenance, just like all of the other hobbies that we have and all of the other equipment that we buy requires maintenance, and we don't have a problem with that. Well, sometimes we do. Boy, I was so excited when I got my riding mower repaired yesterday. It was nice. They require maintenance if they're going to work. Your Christianity's the same. And it's not the idea that it's impossible, but it requires careful maintenance to do good work. Speaking of maintenance, I keep forgetting to do this, but I need to print up a lawn mowing schedule. We're losing one of our lawn mowers soon, and the grass needs to be cut here. And we talk about as different people shift priorities and things move around. And not everybody can be in the pulpit. Not everybody's going to be on TV. Not everybody goes door knocking, although we wish a lot more would. But there are a lot of other things that can be done, that need to be done, that should be done without being asked, really. And it's not just the yard mowing. Can I tell you, when we got home last week, Michelle checked the mail. Not once, but twice, we got 2 different cards, I think from different people, from Chatham, thanking us for coming. Someone took the time to handwrite a card or a letter or a note and mail it with postage to our house, even though we live in the same city and town. They're outdoing us on that. You say, well, Joey usually pays attention. I can't do everything. And some of the others here can't. You can't do everything. But we've got to have people that are paying attention to little details. They matter, and they form a larger package that makes it appealing for people to be here. And I hear that we're going to have visitors from another congregation here this morning with us. And they're going to be judging us, whether they say it or not, when they come in. They're going to be looking for flaws and the mistakes that we make and the things that we do wrong that they don't like. And I'm not saying we have to live to that standard, but I'm saying people come into church and they're looking for all the flaws. I do it when I go to other places because it's not like my home congregation. If you don't like speaking, but you're okay, I don't like writing. But if you're good at writing, you can write bulletins. We will lose that. Springtime maintenance for sick and older people. Roger says he doesn't want help with his yard right now, but he's about to undergo chemo, and it's not just one drug he's taking. It's a cocktail of 4 different chemo drugs, and he will be extremely sick for weeks. And I'm not tooting my horn. I'm just saying yesterday I did 3 yards. I can't make time for some of this stuff. I could, but hopefully we get some help. Building cleaning, if you haven't cleaned the building in a while, please pay attention to that and sign up for it. Relieving newborn mothers. Sometimes the baby gets fussy and they like to be able to sit in here and listen to the lesson. And you just add to this list things that you think of. I'm not bashing anyone, but we've got to start paying attention to details. They matter. All right, I'm going to try to start winding up. There's limited vision. There's limited vision. And then there's limited vision. Ha ha, very clever. Well, I'd try. Sometimes there's limited vision. Sometimes I hate when I can't see. James 4:14, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, what is your life? It's a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Someone says, boy, what a depressing thought. Well, you could switch that around and basically develop the mentality that I'm going to prepare for what comes afterward. But we don't like it when we can't see what's going to happen. I don't. Then there's limited vision. Sometimes I love it when I can't see. 2 Chronicles 26:9. Moreover, in addition to all the stuff that Uzziah had going on, the text says even more than that, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, at the turning of the wall, and fortified them. Also he built towers in the desert and digged many wells, for he had much cattle, both in the low country, in the plains, husbandmen also, and vine dressers in the mountains, and Carmel, for he loved husbandry. When I'm busy with my distractions, guess what? I can't see other people's problems, and it's nice. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying we have hobbies that we like, and I try to temper them. But we love our hobbies, and that's not a modern thing. For the people that could afford it, they loved their hobbies back then. And sometimes I love it when I can't see all the other stuff that's going on, because then I feel responsible and obligated. Moreover, again, Uzziah had a host of fighting men that went out to war by bands, according to the number of their account, by the hand of Jael, the scribe of, however you pronounce that, the ruler, under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains. The whole number of the chief of the fathers of the mighty men of valor were 2,600 chief individuals, and under their hand was an army, 300,000 and 7,500, that made war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks, to shoot arrows and great stones withal. And his name spread far abroad, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong. What is that? That's the illusion of control. And I love it sometimes when I can't see. We love to use our illusion. That's another album title name. Thank you for that smile, Matt. Use your illusion. We love to use our illusion. I'm telling you, I love it when I can't see, when I see what I want to see. And then there's limited vision. We don't know how to see. And this used to be, maybe still is, one of Johnny's favorite verses. Now unto him that is able to ask exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. I had a conversation with somebody in the city, and I'm not going to share a ton of details because I don't want to get myself in unnecessary trouble. But he's a very powerful individual. And I just had him on the phone, and I said, how's your day going? He said, well, it could be the greatest day of my life. Well, he was saying that with a bit of sarcasm because of what was happening. But I said, yeah, I need to work on that mentality. When you're up against something negative and you just say to yourself, maybe this could be totally different from what I expect. I'm not used to thinking that way. We don't know how to see. Able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. And Johnny used to say all the time, do you just ask the most outlandish thing that you can think possible, obviously within spiritual reason? Just what would you ask somebody who was in charge of the entire world? Give me $1 trillion. I'm not saying that's what you would pay for. What would you ask for? Father, I pray that this work here would last for generations, that the church would be restored and flourish. Is it possible? I don't know. Do you ask for it? Another bumper sticker of wisdom. If nothing changes, nothing changes. What does that mean? That's profound. If you don't do anything different, then you can't expect anything to ever change. And what happens as you sit in the pew? I know how it goes because I sit in the pew with you. You hear some massively motivating information, and then it's like the negative magic happens when you walk past the threshold, and all of a sudden the world jumps into your head, and all the hobbies and the anxieties and all the responsibilities that you have take over again, and then it drowns it all out, and you don't make any commitment to make a change. What you do is when you sit in the pew and you hear these things, you write down and you say, I'm going to commit myself to XYZ this week, and I'm going to bite the bullet and change my habits and put all this other stuff to the side, and I'm going to do this week. And you just do that little by little, that degree by degree. It makes a difference. As long as Uzziah sought the Lord, God made him to prosper, but then he changed in a negative way. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Well, why would you leave this? The flesh is weak. Last slide. Is it dangerous to fly with limited vision in foggy weather? Now, this is a question on the site Quora. If you've seen that, that's like maybe a knockoff version of Reddit, if you will. People ask all kinds of supposed experts questions. And I'm just trusting that this person is an experienced pilot. Is it dangerous to fly with limited vision? No, not to fly if you have instrument qualifications and practiced. Now that goes back to the idea of Titus 3:8, maintaining. You are diligent, careful to maintain, learning to maintain good works. It's not difficult to fly with limited vision if you have practice. I've had flights where we took off in the soup and didn't see Earth again till just before touchdown. 1+ on a day like that, the air is normally flat and smooth as glass. Note, I said practiced. Instrument flying is a skill that must be maintained. Don't get rusty. Let's all sing.